Hello, and here we have our final talk for this behavior session. We have Ron Fernández from the University of Veracruzana, Mexico. Behavioral responses to divergent vocal signals in allopatric Neotropical sparrows are explained by acoustic similarities. Over to you, Ron.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to see my talk. My name is Ron Fernández. I am a neurology PhD student at Universidad Veracruzana in Mexico. Here I'm going to tell you about some results of my research related with the response to playback in olive sparrow. We know the importance of the acoustic signals in bird communication system for resource defense, mate attraction, and species recognition. So for the individual, it's very important to understand the message encoded within the signal to take suitable decision. In some birds, the signal recognition involves neuronal mechanisms and sensory experiences that lead to vocal learning and discrimination abilities, where isolation scenarios could play an important role in the geographic variation and divergence of these perceptual systems. We were interested in the study of these perceptual abilities in a neotropical sparrow with pattern of geographic isolation and acoustic divergence in sound. This species is the olive sparrow, or Monops rufibergatus. Currently, there are several positions about the taxonomy of this species, but the most complete consider a complex of three main groups. There are rufibergatus, superciliosus, and verticalis. However, we were interested in the context of allopatric, where we can find 5 discrete populations. There are Gulf, Pacific, Chiapas, Central America, and Peninsula. In our previous research, we found that this species has a geographic vocal variation with a significant divergence of sounds in some population. Here we have some examples of these sounds. This is for Pacific. This is for Gulf. This is for Peninsula. So under this context, and now from the receiver view, first we ask if the birds could discriminate among local and allopatric sounds, where we expect a stronger response to local than allopatric sound. And second, we asked if the strength in the response could be driven by the acoustic similarity of sounds. So we collect sounds from several libraries and complete the lake information with field work. We identified territories, marking individuals, and recorded their sounds. In this map, I'm showing the location where we obtained the recordings. Additionally, we used sounds from a heterospecific generic species, the black-striped sparrow, or Monoscon illustris, that we used as a control stamen. We performed the playback experiments in 2 allopatric populations in Mexico. The Pacific population at the biological station at Chamela in Jalisco, and the Peninsula population in Mérida, Yucatan. Our playback design includes as acoustic treatments, local songs, Pacific or Peninsula in base of the location, the 4 allopatric songs, and the heterospecific song. We measured 7 behavioral variables related with the vocal activity and physical movements of birds. We performed a principal component analysis for dimensionality reduction, where we obtained two principal components. The first one related with vocal behaviors, and the second one related with the physical behaviors. Then we perform a mixed model to assess difference among population treatments. In general, we found that for the Pacific population, the birds only discriminate the heterospecific song and respond in a similar way to the allopatric song. Here, the responses were vocal mainly. On the other hand, for the Peninsula population, we found that birds respond stronger to their local songs only. They did not recognize the allopatric songs. Here, the responses were physical mainly. For the acoustic similarity analysis, we measured the sounds from simulated birds and the stimulus song. We obtained 12 acoustic parameters for the whole song. We performed a PCA, obtained three principal components for the acoustic parameters, and then we calculated the acoustic similarity as the Euclidean distance among songs. Here we performed mixed models to assess if the behavior strength could be driven by the acoustic similarity. We found that for the most acoustic variables, similar songs promote stronger behavioral response, but this significance was found only for the vocal responses. So returning to our question and hypothesis, we asked if birds could discriminate among local and allopatric songs, and they did. But we got an interesting pattern of asymmetry behavioral response, where the Pacific population cannot discriminate among songs, but Peninsula population can. Asymmetric response has been a topic of recent interest. Some explanations consider learning by social experience, sexual selection, and ecological difference among population. In addition, we found that acoustic distance correlates with the strength of response. This correlation were more evident to drive vocal responses. The responses to the stimulus song by allopatric population are likely driven by the same acoustic variable despite the geographic isolation. Finally, we consider that isolation dynamics among population with cultural drift and ecological selection could be acting on songs and sensory systems of olive sparrows, promoting the asymmetry behavioral response to playbacks. The response varies with the degree of acoustic similarity between some. This could be in line with a perceptual mechanism known as generalization, where subjects compare signals that they perceive with a signal template. Under this scenario, the similarity between the perceived signal and the template should predict the strength of the response. I want to thank my co-authors, the institutions that bring financial support, the natural research and its staff, and to all people that assist me in the field. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thanks for your attention.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. So we have our first question. Do you know if there is genetic structuring among these populations? If so, is it in agreement with vocal differences?
Thanks for your question. Thankfully, we haven't this information about the genetic structure, especially at this level of population. Some information are from other close species in Costa Rica for the other for our genre of this species, and some from Texas, but not the whole distribution or population. So we take the opportunity to take some samples. So in the future, we hope take information about that.
Okay, next question. Is there a difference in acoustic variability between the two populations, Pacific and Peninsula?
In a previous research, we found that we found differences between populations, but for example, populations that are in the same taxonomic group, for example, for the superciliosus that consider three isolated population, the differences are not very significant. But for example, Peninsula was very different with the contrasting with the Pacific, for example.
Hey, great talk, Ron. I'm curious if you know whether the level of geographic variation in song is different between populations. Perhaps that's a similar question as before.
Sorry?
It's that this question is very similar to the other one before. I think perhaps you've answered it, but I'll just read it out again. I'm curious if you know whether the level of geographic variation in song is different between populations.
Yeah, I do respond that question to Grace.
Okay, beautiful presentation. Why do you think the vocal and physical responses might differ with respect to vocal traits?
I'm trying to make some additional models to try to understand difference between population, probably, but I think that probably we are under different or strategies, probably because Pacific population prefer vocal response, but Peninsula are more aggressive and they react rapidly to the sounds. So probably they have difference in these strategies. I don't know, but it would be nice to test that.
Hi, great talk. Do you think that differences in territoriality could explain the pattern observed of asymmetric response between the locations?
Thanks, Yolena, but to respond specifically to this, probably it would be necessary making a specific study about the territoriality. Usually these birds lives in short scrubs fragments and move over 100 or 200 meters. So I think that this could not be a situation, but need to be tested specifically for territoriality or for the area of territoriality to check the difference between the population. Thanks for your question.
How large is the vocal repertoire within each population? Are there differences between populations in repertoire size?
Thank you, Jorge. We don't have information about repertoire size at the moment. Usually the songs look similar between the population or have the same structure, but probably I suspect that the Peninsula population could have differences in the song. I don't know, it could be probably something of learning because these populations are in contact with another aeromonops in a sympatry, partly in sympatry. So probably this population in particular will be having a repertoire. Thank you. Sorry, Gabriel, I don't listen to you.
Okay, we are out of time. And there is one last question, so perhaps you have time to maybe answer it in the chat. Sure. But I'm sure on behalf of all the audience, we're all giving you a great big round of applause to all the speakers, some really inspirational talks. Thank you.
Thank you so much.